Hi, everyone, and welcome to your third week of technical writing. This will actually be the middle week of our entire semester. Yeah, these shortened summer sessions go by pretty fast, but I really appreciate everyone's work so hard. Everything has looked really good on the Canvas page. This week, what I wanted to do was get into some of the theoretical underpinnings of technical and professional communication. You'll see it abbreviated as TPC in some of the quotes I'm about to show you from one article. But basically, this week we'll tell you a little bit about other ways of tackling problems in technical communication, and then also I'll get into some theoretical background for teaching in technical writing, which I'm not sure you're supposed to share that part with students. I think you're just supposed to teach, but there's a couple of really exciting new kinds of assignments that instructors are using, and I want to modify them and use them in this course, even though we'll do it in kind of an abbreviated way. But let's get started with our first lecture here. This lecture is about what is called the social justice turn in technical writing. And so this term comes from an article by these three women, Jones, Moore, and Walton, called Disrupting the Past to Disrupt the Future. I'll read you the first quote here just to get you started in the article. But the first thing that I pulled out that they write is the official narrative of our field indicates that TPC is about practical problem solving, a pragmatic identity that values effectiveness. And so, if you remember from the very first lecture for this course, one of the things I wanted to break down right away was to say, hey, I don't think that technical and professional communication or technical writing is only about this really neutral, efficient kind of problem solving. And my solution to that was to just come up with a really broad definition of technical writing. What Jones, Moore, and Walton want to do in this article is a little bit more specific. What they say is what is needed, we argue, is an anti-narrative. An anti-narrative allows the work of the field to be re-seen, forges new paths forward, and emboldens the field's objectives to unabashedly embrace social justice and inclusivity as part of its core. And so, where I said that technical and professional writing isn't just about pragmatic, effective problem solving, that it's this much bigger category that involves all sorts of different kinds of writing and types of communication. Jones, Moore, and Walton say really what we need to do is look back on not only examples of technical writing, but examples of research on technical writing, and talk about how those examples really all have a kind of social justice or inclusivity mindset behind them, or even talk about where maybe that mindset has been missing a little bit. And so last week in the final lecture, I talked a little bit about my own research, and you heard me talk about how what I like to research are syllabi, and you've probably already noticed that with some of the assignments in this course. But really, what excites me about researching the syllabus as a piece of technical writing is the idea for me of getting students involved in writing them and tailoring them as you did and giving feedback on them because I think that as instructors, we take our own expertise and we take our own ways of learning and we put that together into a syllabus. But what we're not always considering are the diverse voices that make up our classrooms, the different kinds of learning styles, and so on. And so that's why I think it's a really important idea in my research to involve students in writing and tailoring syllabi. And so here's another quote from the article. Jones, Walton, and Moore, they write, "We see scholars across the field who are committed to broadening opportunities for citizens, users, scholars, students, and participants. But the dominant narratives of efficiency, technological expertise, and innovation infrastructure too often dominate the field and research projects where inclusion sits at the heart of the project. And so, yeah, for me, I mean, you can even think about like, what are the goals of my research? And so if I say the goals of my research are to create really perfect, really good syllabi, that falls into kind of that second part of what they're talking about here is that my narrative is, hey, I just want to be efficient. I want a really good document for my students, where maybe really what the work is all about is just including students and getting people talking about the syllabi and just sharing ways that we can continue to improve them every year or continue to improve them in different classrooms with different students. And so, where I say we just need to think broadly about what technical writing is, they say, hey, we need to think a little bit more specifically about technical writing and where inclusion might be more important at the heart of the project. And so, in this next slide, I just have a couple examples from our class. You've already seen these. I'll bring up the how to draw a face example again. You saw this from our first lecture in the course, I think, about what is technical writing. And what I pointed out is they have like a nice table of contents. They have good, strong headings and supplemental materials throughout with illustrations. And I said that, that makes it really, to me, a piece of technical communication. So I think Walton, Moore, and Jones would look at this piece of technical writing a little bit differently, though. So up front, we see that we're going to get instructions on how to draw a face from the front, and we get a few examples of faces illustrated here. But if you really took some time with this and scrolled to the bottom, I'm not sure if I did supply you with the link, but if you looked it up and you scrolled to the bottom, what you ended up finding is, the faces that you get to create at the end really, I'll make this a little bit bigger for you, but really they look kind of like me, right? They look like just sort of a standard white guy's face. Um, and even if you scroll to the bottom, I think they switch over to a woman too. Um, but again, you get what would be usually defined as just kind of regular white faces in the how to draw a face instructions, where we know even if we just think about it, but here's a National Geographic website called Faces of the World. We know that faces throughout the world can look very different from just that face that they have us draw. Um, and so I just wanted to kind of call this to your attention to say, there's many different ways of looking at technical writing, but one of the ways is in the way that Moore, Walton, and Jones talk about to think about, is it really an inclusive, socially just piece of writing? And I think this one kind of fails that initial test. Maybe they could have just said here, like how to draw a white face, or you know, given more examples about how to draw different kinds of faces throughout the world, because we know, like I said, just from photo examples, right, that people look differently than just that one face that we get in the how to draw a face instructions. The other one I brought here, I think this comes from Elena. This is a really good, this to me is a really good piece of technical writing in the sense that, yeah, you get it mostly in images. You don't even really need to be able to read in order to figure out what you need to do if someone has a allergic reaction and you need to give them the EpiPen. But even in this, right, like the person they chose to represent receiving the EpiPen is basically someone with pale skin, like me, basically someone who's thin, how I aspire to be maybe one day. But yeah, like these are intentional choices in representation, right? They're not diverse and they're not inclusive. It's the same pale skin, the same kind of build you would expect on just a regular kind of white guy like me. But what we don't see is in the faces, we didn't see darker skins. Here we don't see, somebody could have a disability and need an EpiPen. So what if what if they're sitting in a wheelchair or something like that? How is that different from someone standing and having this representation? And so in within that article, the Jones, Moore, and Walton, they have I call it an interlude, but actually it's really the substance of the article. It's the most important stuff. But they break down all these different ways that you can look at technical writing. They say, hey, you can look at a feminist and gender studies lens. And like I said, the first face you get is a male one, in the how to draw a face one. You can't really tell in the EpiPen what gender the person is, but you know, Race and ethnicity, you can certainly tell they picked white skin, and again, for the how to draw a face, the ethnicity looks just like me. So we know it is kind of in a particular way biased, right? It's biased toward um, yeah, kind of white identities and maybe what other people would label normative, but really, we know that's not inclusive. That doesn't, normative isn't a good thing necessarily. It means that you left out a lot of different groups and a lot of different people who look different than your regular, American white guy. We even know we have different faces and makeups in this country. So why aren't we thinking about those in our technical writing is kind of what the question is here at the in the middle of their article. And like I said, all the things I said in that last sentence, those aren't good things. It's not good that we think of a normative. It isn't good that we think of a regular. These are kind of terms we have to start to break down and really question in our technical writing and communication. International and intercultural professional communication is the same way, right? Like we know that if I have to write an instruction manual for people who speak the same language as me and interact the same way as me, that might be easy. But hey, people don't think like me, and people don't have the same culture as me around the world. So when I am writing and I'm publishing on the internet, for example, where literally anybody can access it, am I considering a lot of different lenses and a lot of different ways of perceiving the world? So I'm mostly not an expert on these three. But that's my best way to kind of talk through it. Now, community and public engagement and user advocacy, these are the kinds of things that you see more often in my work. Like you see, the Taylor the syllabus assignment is actually just a good example. What I like to do in my research and in my work, outside of academia, is to engage with a lot of different community members and what might be called publics, especially if you're doing public relations or something like that, just to get opinions from a lot of people about how a text should look, why they think it should look that way, other texts they've experienced. The more you can get a lot of feedback on that, the more you can produce a piece of technical communication that applies to more people and reaches them more where they're at. And so I consider that also kind of a piece of user advocacy, right? So if we go back to the syllabus example, my users of the syllabi are my students, and what I want to do is I want to advocate for them. I want to advocate for your needs and for what you think a syllabus should be, and so on. And so for me, user advocacy is very near to my heart. But these are all ways that that article is saying, we can overcome some of these biases in technical and professional communication. And the very last one's disability and accessibility. Like I said in the EpiPen example, the person's not seated in a wheelchair. We assume they're able-bodied, which again is maybe not a good assumption all the time. And maybe if you think back to again, the Taylor the syllabus assignment, what did you do with the accommodation statement? Did you take it out entirely? Did you move it up to the front because you were thinking of people who might have a disability? These are all really difficult questions in tech writing that the social justice turn urges us to think about. And so to get back to their argument, which again, I was supplementing it with info from our course. So, they weren't saying exactly all of that, but, I was trying to put it in our terms. But here's kind of where they leave us. They say ultimately inclusion, what we argue for in this text, is an ideal that we believe the field of TPC should work toward. Inclusion means that there is respect for everyone's voices, stories, or knowledges. Diversity, which addresses representation in its most basic form, is a necessary precondition of inclusion. We have to get everyone to the table to be able to do the messy work of promoting and enacting social justice to create a more inclusive environment. And so, yeah, that's why I say kind of at the heart of my user advocacy work is in academia here. What I think would be important for us to do as instructors would be to gather all students' voices or as many students as possible to represent the diversity of the student body in our syllabi. So that's my small way of, I think, trying to fulfill this mission. But of course, within the article, they're talking on a much larger scale. And so I wanted to make sure you saw this quote so you can maybe start to think about it in your technical writing practice and in your technical writing techniques. just think about who am I including by leaving this heading? Who am I including or not thinking about when I'm bolding particular text, or using using graphics? Am I considering colorblind users and so on? These are all very difficult questions I think to ask, but I think that's probably why this article is so important in technical and professional writing. Just some vocabulary for you, and these already popped up on Canvas, which I was actually impressed to see because we hadn't read this article or seen this yet. But they tell us about three P's to really consider. The first thing to consider, and again, this might be more for researchers, but I'll say definitely extend this to the practice on the techniques you're doing in this course. But one is positionality, and that's understanding your identity as complex, dynamic, and contextual. Considering, for example, when I was going through some of the bad examples, I said, I'm like a white guy, so what positionality does that bring to a particular text? Am I the right audience? Am I the person who should be giving feedback and so on? Then there's privilege, positionality that confers unearned advantages. And so, for example, um, yeah, here, actually, I'll give you a real example, and I'll tie it to power. But power, they define as distributed relative to privilege and positionality, considers abuses such as domination, exploitation, and subjectivity. Okay, and so with positionality, like I said, or with privilege rather, that's a positionality that confers unearned advantages. And so let me give you an example of a report that was published recently by the U.S. government. So this is um, the Make America Healthy Again report. If you look at it, it actually uses a lot of the skills we talked about, right? We have strong headings, we have a readable document, we know where to go to find particular kinds of information. Again, strong headings, good use of contrast, use of lists. We certainly have graphics in here somewhere, um, like there. So, it has some of those markers of technical writing. And so when you look at it or look at a report like that, I think you start to assume that it's really good, really well researched information. Um, that's kind of a piece of privilege, I think, is hey, we know the techniques, and okay, maybe we earned those techniques by going out of our way and learning them. But hey, we learned to do technical writing in a particular way, and so we draw on it to make ourselves look really official. But here's a follow-up news story from this is University of Michigan. I think this is the Center of Infectious Disease Research and Policy. Um, they wrote a follow-up that found that some of the citations that were in the Make America Healthy Again report were either fabricated or miscited in various different ways. And so, what does that have to do with privilege and power? I think that's a case where people who are writing from a position of government, who maybe haven't earned their trust yet, are going to use that privilege and that power to, again, use these abuses like to dominate and exploit. Because, for people in this course, especially after you've watched this lecture, it's easy to really question everything that's in like every piece of technical writing, including that report. Um, but yeah, sometimes people are using that privileged positionality and that power to deceive, yeah, to give people the wrong information, and in that way, I think, like I said, kind of abuse and exploit um, not only their own privilege, but the people that they're talking about serving. So anyway, that's again just a big lecture on another way to answer that question of how do we define this thing technical writing? If it is as big as I say, how do we still study it? And some people say, hey, what we really need to focus on is if we're including people, if we're including diverse amounts of people, diverse kinds of people, and thinking about those three P's: the positionality, the privilege, and the power. So again, just a kind of think piece. So I'll give you a follow-up kind of critical question to answer on the Canvas page. And as always, I appreciate your attention. Thanks, everyone. Bye.